All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Brothers All Good. My name is Mike W. with my man Jason F. And we're for episode 15. We're doing something a little special this week. We're bringing back a little bit to chat about what's going on with them because this is Men's Mental Health Month. Yeah, I know people around going, June, Men's Mental Health Month. I ain't never heard that. Yeah, probably. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. But before, as we start tonight, I got to ask, Jason, my man, how you doing? You good?
Well, it's been a long week already, and it's only Tuesday. It's been a long month, and it's not even the first week. Or I guess it is the first week. It's 10 days in. Yeah, it's been long. Ultimately, I'm doing good. Went to therapy today and had a really good session. What I love about my therapist is she doesn't give me advice, and I appreciate that. She's very Socratic. She asks questions, and that's what I like. I've been seeing her now for roughly January of last year. So we're 18 months in, and mentally things have never been as good probably. Well, I won't say in my life, but in the last 10 years or whatever. So I recommend for everybody, and it ain't just therapy, period. You have to get someone that knows what they're talking about, someone that like can speak a language that you can understand, because it's tough. But other than that, I'm doing really, because of that, I'm able to handle all the things that I got going on. My life is good. I still been overpaid. If God don't give me nothing else, I still been overpaid. So I'm doing good. How about you, brother? You good?
I'm good. I got to spend the weekend up at my mom's to check on her. She's doing well. Move my table. She's doing really well. On Sunday, I spent time with my daughter who loves skydiving. So I joined her jumping out of planes out of Lake Elsinore. It was amazing. You've never jumped out of a plane. Jason, my brother, I encourage you, man, when you go up in a plane, jump out. Let you understand what true faith is all about.
No, that's not true. That's not true faith. True faith is sitting in the plane and letting it land. That seems like foolishness to me. I'm good. Brother, I'm good. You know what I'm saying? I ain't doing none of that. No, sir. I'm glad you did it, but I ain't going to do it. No, sir.
All right. Well, I think I get Pastor P out there. We're making a thing.
Yeah, we ain't going to. That is not going to be no thing. You know what I'm saying? Not with me. You know what I'm saying? I ain't going to say never, but not today. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to happen on the 10th of June or the 20th of June. That I can tell.
So you're saying there's a chance?
There's always a chance. There's always a chance. There's always a chance, but it's not going to happen today.
All right.
And I want to ask our brother Dre and brother Nate, once we describe what we get ready to do right now, I want to ask their opinions about that, and do they think I'm wrong for not wanting to do it? So, but before we do that, I just want to say, Brothers Y'all Good is more than just a podcast. It's a real talk space where black men, as you can see, come through, open up, and get honest about mental health. This show aims to dive deep into stuff that matters: faith, fatherhood, fellowship, and all the ups and downs of navigating life as a black man today, from dealing with stress, anxiety, and trauma to breaking through the stigma that's been holding us back. This podcast keeps it real with personal stories, as we'll see here tonight, expert advice, and practical tools to help you find peace and strength. This ain't just talk. It's about building each other up, sharing experiences, and creating a healthier, stronger community. So we're glad you pulled up. Thanks for tuning in, and let's have the conversations that heal. And together, we're breaking the silence, overcoming barriers, and helping every brother to say, yeah, brother, I'm good. As I said, I'm glad to have these two brothers here, and I'm just going to kick this off with a real general question. Am I wrong for not wanting to skydive right off the bat? Am I tripping? I just want to know. Is I'm tripping?
Well,
I don't even like the way this is starting off.
Right? Yeah. You said what?
I don't even like the way this is starting off.
Well, I'm trying to think like which hat do I have on? Is it just me, Nathan, or is it me as a therapist, right? Because whenever somebody, asks a question, you want to know, well, what's the purpose of that question, right? Like, what are you really asking? But I'll just say for me, I've skydived myself. I went with my wife for her birthday. And it was an amazing experience. And I really enjoyed myself. And so I won't say you're tripping, but I would say be open-minded to it, because I think you might enjoy it more than you think.
Man, I'm about to ask Ojere, man. What you think, Ojere?
Nah,
I don't
you
like
ain't
that.
tripping.
I don't like that, Nate. Man, come on, Nate. Man, I need you to be
Nah.
with me. Whose side you on, man?
Yeah.
Nah, you ain't tripping. As I was listening to the dialogue a little earlier, I was like, yeah, that's not something I would do. I think coming where I come from, I had enough thrill and excitement. I don't need any more. And I think that I'm not closed all to it, but initially I'm like, nah, I'm good. I think I was made to fly in the plane seated, not jump out. But I could change my mind one day, but for right now, I'm good.
For right now, you cool, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about. Well, I think that kind of leads into probably a good jumping off point. I think there's stigmas, there's all kinds of other things that may stop us from being able to do things, to explore what it means to live healthier, happier lives. Like, what if something about my life would be better if I skydived? I mean, how do we bridge those things where there's something that maybe I would need to do, but I don't? Like, how do I know if I'm tripping if I don't want to do something? I don't know if I'm asking the question correctly, but I know there are things in my life that I need to do that I'm hesitating to do because either there's some pain behind it, there's some whatever. Like, what are some things that we can do? Because I do believe that there are things that I need to do in my life that would enhance the quality of my life, but there's these automatic roadblocks. How would you like reason through a question like that? I don't even know if it's a good question, and if not, rephrase it. But I'm curious to see what the two therapists would think.
I think what comes to mind initially, when either myself or somebody I'm in a space with is thinking about what they might need to do, but they're identifying like these roadblocks or barriers. I want to explore like, what's the roadblock, what's the barrier, kind of what's that thing that's either telling you this is something that you do, this is something that brothers don't do, and start to unpack it from there. So I think until we get to kind of understanding what's the roadblock, like I'm not going to say, hey, just go do that. I want to explore like what's the holdup, right, and then kind of work from it through that way.
No, I think one of the things I try to do, as a therapist and a counselor is it's called kind of unconditional positive regard. I think I may have brought that up here before, or maybe I haven't, but it's something that I really try to steep myself in. And what I mean by that is, even your resistance or your willingness to do something or not do something, I try to work with that and be curious about that. Kind of like what Ojere is saying, right? Because a lot of times we can be really critical of ourselves for not making a change that we aren't even aware of, right? And for me, what I really try to do in the counseling booth with clients is make the unconscious conscious, right? And again, that's kind of what Ojere is talking about. It's like, so let's talk about that resistance. Let's start with that. Sounds like maybe there's some resistance there. Tell me about that, right? Where do you think that started for you, right? When you tried something new. And what's interesting, particularly with men, but particularly with Black men, is a lot of times that started in education, right? Because I work with men now, and that's something I hear a lot is like, hey, like I wasn't encouraged to really try something new And when I did, I didn't do so well, and I was reprimanded for it, right? So that's just kind of a small example of how we learn to not try new things, right? And so, like, what's your relationship with change? And we talked about this in our men's group as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is your relationship with change? How often do you have a chance to even stop, pause, and reflect about that change? And this is sort of, I feel like there's always the opposite sort of to a question, right? And so what if there's a payoff for you staying the way you are? So that's kind of the thing, right? Because we say we want to change, but let's talk about the payoffs for the current behavior. Are you getting what you want from it? If we were looking at it from a non-judgmental place, right? Like, hey, these things I'm doing that maybe are not good for me are getting me attention. They're getting me, even if it's bad attention, right? So I try to really be as honest as I can and get clients to be honest with themselves. And I'm throwing a lot of terms out there, but something that we talk about is like radical honesty, right? So how can we do that? How can we be transparent with ourselves so that we can do this work of changing ourselves?
Wow.
Yeah. The thing for me, Jason, is when I accepted my daughter's first invitation years ago to jump out of a plane, I felt the same way you sound, Dre said. Hey, I don't need that. And I read part of that was fear. Part of that I thought was common sense, right? It don't make no sense to jump out of a perfectly good plane. It's hard enough to black men in America without putting myself at risk on something I don't have to. But what I recognized was I learned if I could get through that fear, what might be on the opposite side of it. And for me, it was exhilaration. It was fun, it was joy. And it taught me that not only could I get through that fear, but it made it easier for me to face other things I might be afraid of. Because I did something that I knew was scary, and I got to do that. So I didn't realize until I did it how it helped build and strengthen me in ways that affected the choices I made at work, the choices I made in my relationship. Because there's a lot of stuff we don't do because we're afraid. And it taught me that there's something on the other side of that fear. And if I can get to that, right? If I stood on the ground at the jump center and saw the smiles on everybody's face as they landed, well, that's what's the other side. A lot of smiles, a lot of happiness, a lot of hugs. And so that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. One of the things, I don't know what it was about what you said, Nate, and Ojere, you kind of tapped into some of it too when you talked about growing up, right? Or from where I'm from. Where I'm from, we don't do this. We don't do that.
Right.
And I remember when I was growing up, I wanted to join the military, and my dad was opposed to it. My father was like, "Man, black men don't have no business being in the army," and I wanted to join the army. I went to, but anyway, and I wonder how much stigma holds us back, right? And then when I want to do stuff, what Nate, what you talked about is I want to do stuff because it brings attention, and even if the attention is harmful, it's super harmful. If I'm not aware of the things that do it, it doesn't benefit me nor the people who look to me for things. And so how do we, like, has there ever been a time for either one of you that you were maybe practicing a behavior that was conditioned based on where you were from? And if so, what was it? And then what did you do to to get out of that? And then what was that like? What was that journey like to get out of it? Because I think that that's typical for a lot of people. It is so easy to be typical, and it is really hard in general to be atypical. But I think specifically coming from communities where many of us come from, being atypical is not a good thing. So how would y'all respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that question, because one of the things I wanted to chime in to kind of deliver in the same vein as Nate was talking about, how some of our indoctrination happens in education, but it also happens within our peer groups. What also happens within, like, say, Black male and male culture, right? Black men don't do this, don't do that, as Jason, you were alluding to. I think about a behavior that was kind of co-signed by my peers, and that I had to make a change into doing something different, was, growing up and being part of a clique within the Skyline community, GPM. And I was part of that for a long time. And when I graduated from Morris in '97, I went off to Grossmont, and I was still kind of, affiliated or whatnot. But when two of my partners, Rodney, rest in peace, and Lil Chris, rest in peace, passed away, there was something that shifted in me that was like, you got to go another direction. And all I did was I stopped hanging on the block, stopped being around everybody. I was kind of a bookworm. Was school, campus, library, home. I kind of just went a whole nother direction, and I didn't go to that old neighborhood for a couple of years. I kind of just like removed myself from that whole area, and it was the best thing that ever happened. I wouldn't be LMFT. I wouldn't have had all the wonderful experiences I had in education and in the San Diego school district had I kept tiptoeing around this other stuff. And I remember one of my partners later on, he was like, man, he was like, Dre boy, like, you and Marcus, like, y'all made a whole beeline and did something totally different. And other folks, decided to, continue with the program. And so that's, I think, one of the things I am grateful for, is being able to listen to my calling and make a move.
Dang. Listen to your calling. I'm gonna write that down. I gotta make a note. Hold on. Okay. I don't want to interrupt, Nate, because I know you got something. I know something that's got. I know that look when the therapist is up. Hey, look. When the brother takes
yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah. I think for me, what I'm working on right now is sort of being present and noticing how I feel in different situations, right? And what I can say is that's what I really enjoy about these conversations, is it taps into something deep within me in a very positive way, right? So I want to share that, but I want to kind of go back to the question, because something I hear all the time that I sort of push back on is there's a stigma for mental health, and particularly for Black men. And you asked the question, right? And I like to dispel myths, right? That's kind of my thing, because this idea that Black men respond differently, or any way that I would say as a counselor or psychologist is like abnormal, or I think it's false, right? So for example, we all have things that we respond to that are rooted in our childhood. Right? Like that's natural and normal, right? Everybody has gone through something, and because of that, it impacts their ability to connect, to be mentally well, in the same way that it impacts Black men. Does that make sense?
100%.
Right. So this idea that for me, like Black men, we experience roadblocks that are rooted in childhood, and that impacts us today. It's true, but it's true for everybody, right? So I really like to start there, because again, I also look at it from a systems perspective of like, you're an individual in a system, right? And so how does a culture live in, what does your conditioning, how does that play a role in how you show up mentally, physically, and spiritually? And a lot of times when you reframe or reflect on that question, a lot of times the men I work with are like, wow, I never really thought of it that way, right? And that's a part of the thing that's impacting us the most, is we are not given the space to really reflect and really say, like, dang, these are some really critical ways that my needs were missed, and this is how it impacted me, because we're human like everybody else, right? So I would say there's not as much of a stigma for Black men towards mental health as much as Black men are stigmatized. That's kind of how I look at it, because I think that changes the language and that shifts the focus. Because I mean, I'm sure you're aware, we're under a microscope, right? So I really like to, again, ask, like one of my mentors said, like, ask better questions, right? And so that's what I really like to sort of take my time on, is, ask better questions, right? And even unpack the question, right? What is implicit in the question that we're not acknowledging? You know what I mean? So I know that was maybe a bit long-winded, but I feel it's important to say that, right? Because when I think about my life and when I reflect on my life, you mentioned something that has been played a critical role in my life, and that was fear. And so it's so interesting because I'm the son of a single mother. We were on welfare. We were homeless. I went to 8 or 9 different schools, K through 12, right? And fear was something that was so integral to my life. And I lived in fear for a long time. So I was just trying to survive. And, that, and the funny thing is I didn't really start working through my fear until I got into therapy in grad school. And what I did was I took all the fear, and instead of doing negative things like hanging with the wrong crowd or, doing things I wasn't supposed to do, I used fear to motivate me to prove people wrong, right? And so I was kind of using fear in the opposite way, and I was getting praise for it, right? Like, look how successful you are now. You're doing this, you're doing that, right? But fear was what was motivating that. Like, I have to make up for lost time, and I have to do everything I can to build myself up so that I'm so that I can withstand anything. And that kind of was, I'm finding now at 33 years old, I'm still very young, but I'm not as young as I used to be. I'm finding now that that's not sustainable, y'all. Like, that's not sustainable. Like, I was just going off pure adrenaline. And, we kind of talked a little bit about it before this call, but noticing like these feast and famine cycles that I was in, right? Like, a lot of energy doing this, doing that, but then I'd have to retreat and get my energy back because I'm like bruised, and I'm battered, I'm just doing things that just aren't sustainable, right? And so you ask, like, what are those things rooted in childhood that sort of show up now? And when I think about fear, I also think about trust, because fear makes it hard to trust, And so that was really challenging for me because, I couldn't, there's different kinds of trust. There's trust in self, there's trust in others, there's trust in God, and there's trust in life. And I struggled with those. And it showed up in a lot of my relationships and my connections, right? Because I wanted connection, but relationships were so burdensome to me because I felt like I couldn't trust people because I'd been let down so much, right? And so, there are times today where I feel it in my chest still, and now I can name that. No, that's fear. That's kind of closing my chest up. I need to breathe. I need to sort of get out and get some fresh air, right? So those are kind of the things that I would share, right? Of that impacted me as a kid. It's just that fear, man. That fear keeps you stressed, and the cortisol levels high, and can't sleep. And amped up, and so those are sort of the things that I still actively have to work through, and yeah, so that's how to answer that question.
Wow. Yeah. One thing, couple things I wanted to address. One of the things you said, and I believe you said chasing your calling. Ojere, you talked about that. You said chasing your calling. Is that what it was?
I think it was hearing my calling, like being able to like hear that
okay.
ancestrally there was a guide saying you need to do something different, like being able to listen to that versus overriding it and just keeping with the program.
And I wonder if it's being able to listen to it or if it's being willing to hear it and do something. So I wonder if everybody has
Both,
that.
maybe.
Okay. Yeah. That, I mean, I think that's definitely something. And then the correction about even further stigmatizing mental health in Black men as though it's something you said, Nate, as though it's something unique or germane to the Black community. And it's not. That's typical in communities, period. Men, period, have a difficult time talking about mental health. And it's ironic because I wonder if even that, I mean, that's another thing from childhood, as you talked about, that just carries over and it becomes an excuse for me not to do something. Well, we ain't really supposed to do this anyway. People I know that, and it has caused me many times to run from things that I need to face because it made it easier to just say, well, this ain't nobody tripping that I'm not doing it. Nobody does it. And it's like, man, so I appreciate that correction. And I received that. That was good. That was good. That was good. What's coming up for you, Mike?
Well, I was just thinking this. For those that didn't see Dre and Nate before, they might not know who we're talking to tonight. And so I thought maybe we just take a moment and let them reintroduce themselves to our audience.
You make a great point.
Might just be diving in now. So let me start with you, Ojere. If you could just reintroduce yourself to our audience, tell them a little bit about who you are and why this space, mental health, is so important for you.
Good evening, good people. My name is Ojere, the Chief Bush fan, longtime residents of the Skyline community. Was a child of Fulton, Keeler, and Morris, and went off to Grossmont and heard the call to become a counselor, but decided to become a licensed therapist. And so currently working at Grossmont College. I have the honor to work with students across age, gender, diversity, orientations. And it's an honor to be in that space and to be able to provide a space for students to work through whatever personal challenges, academic challenges are in the way of them transferring and graduating. I also work part-time with the Weight Room, which is a group virtual practice where we work specifically with Black males, both adolescent and adult. And so over the past couple of years, I've been honored to be in spaces with brothers of different ages and being able to hold space for them. And the reason why this space and many other spaces like this is important is because for me growing up, I came up under the stigma of, well, I didn't even know there was a stigma, to be transparent, but I just know that Black folks don't go to therapy. There was no mentioning of therapy. The close that I would probably say was a school counselor. And I grew up with a father who had paranoid schizophrenia. And so as you can imagine, if you've ever heard the stories or known somebody whose family or personal life was impacted by schizophrenia, you know that it is a very difficult thing to deal with. And so just imagine a family of 4 dealing with that dynamic without any kind of support systems, right? And so that experience has shaped me, good and challenging. And with someone who's lost both parents, this work is very important to me because I became who I became because I've been in spaces to be able to talk about things to feel things, to connect with my body, my breath, and be able to peel off the layers of harm and address the adaptations I developed to get through the complex trauma. And that's the trauma that happens consistently. And so I would say most of my life was traumatic. And so I'm a walking survivor in many ways. And part of my calling has been to hold spaces and walk with people along their journey as a guide, right? I'm not here to tell anybody what to do, but I'm gonna walk with you step by step.
And let me just real quick, let me just say, I've been knowing Ojere. I knew him. I knew him when his calling was calling him. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I knew when he could have went either way. And and I said it last time, and I'll say it again, that had you not followed whatever was guiding you in that moment, there's a good chance that a lot of people would have never heard about you.
Facts.
You know what I mean? You probably wouldn't have been here. You came up in that era where a lot of people your age now are in prison or in the grave. So, man, I was there. I used to be your barber. The good thing about it, man, one of the things that I noticed, and then Nate, I'll pass it on to you, but I just think it's worth noting that what would have been a shame for you going that direction is because that was never you. It would have been sad for you to go down that because I knew you'd have been kicking, as the Bible says, kicking against the goads or kicking against the prick. You would have been, it would have made no sense for you to do that. I always knew that there was something different. You always had direction. You always knew what you wanted. Remember, even with the haircut, you knew that I want this specific haircut. And you made decisions on your own. You were always willing to be an individual. You never, I'm not going to say a disruptor, but like you always did your thing. Like there's no question about it that you had your own swag. You had your own everything ever since you were a youngster, 100%. And so I'm just grateful that you found your calling and you went with it. So I just wanted to add that here and say kudos to you, man. I'm super proud of you for being what you are and who you are today. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. I say,
Brother Nate, sorry about that, man. I just had to get that off my nest.
Yeah, you don't got to apologize, man.
Yes, sir.
I love to hear people's stories, you know.
Yes, sir.
And I love to hear why people do what they do. And I know Ojere well, but every time it just hits differently. So yeah, no need to apologize.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so for myself, you know, my name is Nathan Klein. I am the founder of Nathan Klein Counseling and Consulting. So I do a lot of work with couples, and I do a lot of work with individuals, helping them to reclaim their own power and you know, create a space where they can learn and grow and learn some things about themselves that maybe they didn't know about themselves, right? And so that's something that I do because one of the things that, you know, my mentors have always shared with me, there's this idea of you know, what I give to you, give to others, and that's how you pay it back. And so Ojere is included in this, right? Like this is sort of the philosophy that guides my life because I was lost out here. You know, I was kicked out of high school. You know, I was told you're not college material, and I was basically thrown away. And a lot of people look at me today and don't see that. They see somebody who's a lot more well put together, somebody who's more grounded. But I like what Ojere said. My life is one big story of complex trauma. I mean, I was swimming in it. And so much so that my normal was chaos. Like that was my baseline. And as I mentioned earlier, I sought it out because my normal was chaos. It's change. So I would do things to upend my own life because this is what felt familiar to me. As messed up as that sounds, like that's what's so crazy. This is what somebody taught me was, you know, as much as we want to change for the better, we will do what's familiar because that's how we're higher. So when we're trying to climb up that mountain and we don't know what's on the other side, but we can look back and we know what's in that valley, a lot of times we'll turn back and go into that valley, right? And it wasn't until I had mentors really share with me and give me the language to heal that I started to make the changes, you know? And so for me, you know, like I said, one of the things that I did is I was kicked out of high school, and then I went to Grossmont College, and I flipped it. So I said, well, now I got something to prove. So I used that as fuel. So I was angry, like I was pissed, and I was like, I'm gonna show them who I am, because I remember when I left high school, I had to go in front of this committee of people, and they basically said, hey, if you want to walk, you got to present your case at graduation. So I walk in and I'm like, it was a setup right away. So I'm 16, 17 years old. Like, these people they just want to embarrass me. And that's what they did. And so they looked at me and they said, didn't anybody teach you right from wrong? Like, who's raising you, basically, right? And I remember I had to sit there and I had to eat that. And I remember walking out of that office saying, nobody will ever be able to talk to me like that again. And so I went to Grossmont College. I got involved with the Ojere program, and ended up going to San Diego State, graduated Grossmont with honors, went to San Diego State. And this is how I met Mike, because at one point I was going to do law. And because I thought to myself, how can I really stick it to these people? I want to use different language. But
how can I stick it to these folks?
Yeah, I want to say something else, but that was the conversation going on in my head, and so I thought, what is the most prestigious, most influential? What title can I gain so that when I say it, people respect me? That was what I was after: a title, a role, and something wasn't resonating for me. And so and this is the beautiful thing about my life is, every moment that I was going to go off the edge, like God sent somebody, right? To sort of steer me in the right direction. And so I remember, you know, sitting down with Mike and having these conversations about what it meant to be a lawyer, what it really is, right? And sort of him giving me, and this is what I always respect about you, Mike. I don't know, I've shared this with you, but you always kept it real, right? Just because you did it, you weren't going to just say you should do it too. You always kept it real with me. And it was that conversation and other conversations that said, let me put a pause on this. So I was accepted into some law schools, but I decided to defer admission, and I went to go live abroad. So I lived abroad for 3 years in Spain and China. And then I stayed connected with my mentor from Grossmont. And, you know, he said, well, what about counseling, right? That could be an option too. So then I came back and did the CDB program at San Diego State. And I just wanted to be a college counselor. Like, I wanted to help people pick their classes and do that kind of thing. I didn't want to do mental health counseling because I just never had any experience with it myself. And if I did have experience, they were mediocre experiences, nothing that was transformative, nothing to say, I'm gonna go spend my hard-earned money on therapy, right? There's a lot of mediocre therapists out there, by the way. And so what happened is I come back into the CDB program and I'm sharing my story, and the director of the program says, you know, sounds like you were depressed. And nobody had ever shared that with me, right? And it made me feel seen. And I was like, damn, I just thought I was angry. Like, that's what people were telling me, right? Like, you're just angry. Like, you're a problem. Like, you're rebellious. These are the things people were telling me. And I'll never forget that the first time I was ever in the counseling booth with a client, I was sitting across, and I'm a very fidgety person, right? People who have been in my physical will say, hey, you kind of move a lot. You're very fidgety. And that's a result of my trauma, right? But when I was in the counseling booth with this student, time, it just stopped. It just stopped. And you know, I just remember being so present with this person. And my supervisor was watching the session, said, what happened when you went in there, right? Because I experienced you completely different than out here. Like, you were, what happened? And for me, what happened is I in that moment, I knew that I had found my calling. I was so locked in on what I was doing and how sacred this space was, that I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that changed the whole course of my life. And so fast forward, now I'm a licensed therapist. And I work with the most vulnerable populations in higher education to really destigmatize them being stigmatized, right? Because there's all these narratives about people who have been impacted by the justice system or people who are poor, right? And I use that word in quotes, right? And what we do to those people is we dehumanize them. And I'm passionate about, like, there's so much human potential that we're wasting, and I refuse to stand by and watch that potential continue to be wasted. Because the reality is that could be me. And that's how I see somebody tweaked out, when I see somebody homeless, when I see somebody down on their luck, I see myself. And I just feel very strongly that it's my calling to be of service, to change their lives in whatever way I can.
Want to just respond quickly.
Oh yeah.
As you know, Nate, you and I know each other, and I think sometimes we hear more and more of each other's narrative.
Yeah.
What really hit me was you feeling thrown away. Like that really, really hit me, touched me, and hurt, because seeing who you are in this moment, I'm really glad that you met the people that you met, because so many people would not have had a chance to encounter you and experience you. And it made me think about how Black boys and males get harmed in educational systems. And I'm really, really disheartened that happened to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It's interesting, Nate, as you were sharing, one thing that comes across clear for you is your passion for what you do.
Yeah.
Like, mental health is not just a job or you know what I mean? It's not just something that you just did because you couldn't find no other classes to take or you know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Some folks just be doing stuff just because. It is obvious that this is where you're supposed to be. My hope and my prayer for you is that you have the courage to create the space that you know is needed for those that you want to work with. Because it's difficult. When we talk about narratives growing up, and you know what I'm saying? Like, and even sometimes, when you kind of, for me, when I realized that I sort of been getting punked by my childhood, or you know what I'm saying? Like, man, that's not always enough to make me do something different.
Yeah.
It's not always enough for me to like something. And I respond out of like, man, you're not going to do that to me again. And the truth is, yeah, it's happening to you right now. It's happening right now. The visceral response you're doing, and it ain't going nowhere. You ain't finna bust a grape in a food fight, right? It doesn't translate into more courage or into, and so I just believe that what you have, and it's obvious that with Ojere, you have the same passion. It shows up differently, but how I recognize yours, Ojere, was maybe it's kind of weird. I recognize yours because of the path that you took to get here. I recognize the fact that you have a master's degree, knowing you, who I knew as a youngster. You know what I'm saying? That's not typical. Your passion shows up. You both had to go the same way. Don't get it twisted. I mean, you just present differently. Your passion is in the amount of information that you go and get and that you seek, and that, you know what I mean? Like, your path to this place proves the passion that you have. You're willing to look into different methods and different things like this to try to find things that work. And I'm just very, very grateful that there's brothers like y'all in these spaces. And I'm grateful for your stories that produce these two men right here. Very, 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 very grateful for what it was. Yeah. What's coming up for you, Mike? Man, it's just good. I'm all in my feelings right now. You know what I'm saying? I'm all in my feelings, and like, man, this is good.
Part of what's in it for me is what the two of them, now that we know their stories, a little bit of their background, what they were able to create when they came together. And so I wanted to give them a chance to talk about what they do on the first Tuesdays with their men's group, because I've had a chance. I can't be there every month, but I think I've made 3 out of 6 months or something like that. It's an amazing space of men coming in, being safe and vulnerable, talking about what's going on in their lives. And last Tuesday, we got the experience of people understanding the power of relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
The group's been meeting often enough that folks are feeling really comfortable. We have folks asking for help. Do you know anybody in the community that can help me with this in a way that's so powerful? And so I want them to talk a little bit about the work that they do on the first Tuesdays, how that got started, and what it means for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Ojere, you want to take that one?
Go ahead. Like you was ready?
Yeah. Yeah, you asked like how did it get started? And honestly, for me, one I have to give credit to Mark Ritchie and Christopher Seaford, right, from Big
Mm-hmm.
Cut Barber Salon, because they're pillars in the community for real. If you know them, their shop is right off of Euclid Avenue, and Chris has been cutting my hair for as long as I can remember, right? And it's therapy when you're in the barber chair. So, I see him once a week. So he's a very good friend of mine, and I would tell him about what I'm doing and my education and what I'm doing and different things. And he said, we really need that. Our community needs that. And so I think you should get a group going, right? And I was like, nah, like I'm not ready. I'm cool, like and I'm sure y'all know how it is. There's so many different things that we have to do, and it's never really the right time, right? And but one day I put up to the shop, and he says, "Hey Nate, the first group is going to be here. Here's the flyer, or here's the date and time. We got the location. I'll see you then." And so I was like, "Well, damn," And so then I thought about it, and I was like, "Well, it can't just be me doing this because it's important that people have as much support and space that they can." And Ojere, who was already a good friend of mine, we've been building our relationship over time. And I thought, man, I know how much he loves to do groups. I know how involved and invested he is in the community. And I asked him, did he want to join with me? And he said, absolutely. And so we've been doing it ever since. And I like what you shared, Mike, because it's really blossomed, right? And the thing for me is we just got to be consistent, right? And if we're consistent, then everything else will take care of itself. And that's what, Ojere talked about, that if nothing else, let's just be consistent. We're going to be at the same place, same time, every month, regardless of the different, because we're both very busy people, right? We have things. And so I want to say I really respect the commitment that Ojere has made to be in that space, because, he comes straight from work, right? And so do I. And so we do this because we love our people and we love Black men, and there's such a need and a space, and I'll say I'm tired of people playing in our face, man. And this is my thing, because I didn't know what was happening to me for almost 3 decades of my life. It wasn't until I met somebody that said, here's what you're experiencing, here's what's going on, and helped me really give language to it, right? And so that's what I want to do for others, because again, we talk about the stigma for Black men and mental health, but again, my argument is that Black men are stigmatized. So I really stay with that, right? And so, this space is designed to really build community. And again, for me, we don't exist in a vacuum. We're not individuals. We are individuals, but we make up an ecosystem. And so that ecosystem has been damaged intentionally, right? again, it's not as if we created these outcomes ourselves, right? These are societal outcomes, right? These are socioeconomic outcomes. And for me, I will not allow, or for me, it's important to acknowledge that because I think it puts things into perspective, right? Here's how you've been conditioned. Let's look at that objectively, and let's talk about how you've responded to the stimulus that's been going on, right? And let's help you get the outcomes that you want, right? And so, yeah, what I've noticed too over time is that the brothers have gotten a lot more comfortable talking to each other. And one of the things that when you're learning about groups and what the magic is of running a group, you know a group is good when it runs itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you can just sit back and let the brothers prompt themselves and start to help and do that work, that's where the magic is. And I think that's kind of what's been happening in our space. And it's been really cool to watch it unfold, right? And I'll say this last piece before I pass it on, is one of the things that's important to me is, that we create warriors, right? And, the difference between a warrior and a soldier is a soldier, I can only do what you tell me to do. I can't think for myself. So if you put me out there in the world and all you gave me was direction, I can't think outside of that. I can't think on my feet. I can only do what you've told me and parrot that. But if you teach me how to strategize and how to, get the emotional landscape, then I can adjust to life that is going on in session and I can respond appropriately, right? So that's kind of what I hope to accomplish with our group is to really develop men into emotional leaders, right? That can go out into their communities and their families and lead from an emotional standpoint, right? And be aware of what's coming up for them. What's that rooted in? When are they being sort of gaslit, right? When are they sort of, being mistreated, right? And I've said this so many times before, but, half of knowing who you are is knowing who you're not. And so in order to do that, we really have to do the work to learn ourselves so that we can be leaders.
Man.
Oh, shame. So how do I follow up with all that? I guess what I could.
How about this, Ojere? This might be. Can you maybe tell folks like what would somebody expect based on what Nate just talked about? If somebody wanted to slide through, like, what do they expect? How does someone show up? Never did it before. I don't even know if I like this. I don't want to. You know what I mean? Like, how would somebody? What would they expect? What would you tell somebody that's looking to know what y'all got there?
I would say first and foremost, Apple Map or Google, where Malcolm X Library is, to let you know the right location, and pull up. And I would say to.
And if you don't know where Malcolm X Library is, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, we'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah.
But to come with an open mind and an open heart, know that there's an invitation to share, but it's not a requirement to be in the space. Sometimes brothers who come for the first time will show up and will be in the space and soak up all that's been shared, and they'll say, like, this has been really rich, even though they haven't shared. And I often believe that even if a person isn't sharing, that there's something happening on the inside, there's work happening on the inside, because oftentimes there's so many shared experiences happening in the space. And I think brothers may realize that, oh, I'm not alone in this. And so I would say, come with an open mind. If you feel moved to share from your own personal experience, and know that we believe in confidentiality. So what is said in the space stays in the space. We don't want folks share out to be trickling around, San Diego or whatnot. And just know that you'll be in a space where the intention is to have you feel seen and heard. Oftentimes, I think brothers navigate the world not feeling heard or seen. And so this is an opportunity to feel seen by two brothers who I love feeling seen. I'm not used to it, but I love it. And I know how to hold the space for folks to feel seen and heard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think one of the strengths of it is it's open to everybody in the sense that you could have lived in San Diego for 40 years and you could pull
Hmm.
through, or you could have been like the brother that showed up last week. I just got in from Detroit.
Yeah.
Right.
I heard about the
Right.
spot and I pulled up. So you don't have to have a history in San Diego.
Yeah.
And one of the things we discussed is the idea that there's really not a space in San Diego where we meet up. There's not the spot that we go to that, hey, I'll see you this Saturday because everybody's going to be at the park or this venue or whatever. And so it allows people, I like what you said, Ojere, about being seen, because we've had people that have been in San Diego 20, 30 years and never seen the brothers in the room that have been here for their entire lives. They're like, yeah, because there's no place where we're guaranteed to see each other. So it's a great
Yeah.
space to make those types of connections. And it's absolutely true. The group is big enough that no one's required to share that if they don't want to, but it's small enough that if you want to share, you can feel
Hmm.
seen and heard. And I think that's just a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would add to that, someone coming, what you'll find out is that there are brothers from different walks of life, different age groups, and I think that's the gumbo of it, right? We're such a diverse group of human beings, and there's so many different experiences coming in the room, and there's a lot of knowledge in that space too. Nate and I have some understanding about therapy and processing, but these brothers also come in with a lot of lived life experiences that's also important.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about? What is it about group therapy? Is it the talking? Is it the sharing? Is it the listening? I mean, I know it's all of that, but what happens to a person in those moments, right? Like when I'm sitting in a group and if the topic is kind of something that I relate to and whatever, what is happening to me as a person? Like, how is that therapeutic?
Mm. Well, when I think back to my early days of therapy, which started in groups, I think how I would answer that is I think group therapy is a space where one, you get to try out different things or parts of yourself. For example, I'm pretty low key, I'm not the loud person in the room. So for me, being in a group space and sharing my story, man, it always started with tears, snot, all that stuff. But it was an opportunity for me to like kind of almost like little by little kind of develop this muscle of being in a space with strangers and also having like maybe 15 or 20 therapists, right? Because you have maybe two or three people who are facilitating, but everyone kind of comes into this role as kind of a therapist because they are also kind of responding to you, giving you feedback, letting you know how they experience you in the moment. And so I think for me, group has been so powerful because it's a lot more happening than just in the one-on-one. I can get feedback from multiple people, and I also have a space where I can try out some new things. If I want to be more present, more engaged, I want to be more disengaged, I can try that out in this space and get feedback about that from
Yeah.
numerous people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I think that can't piggyback off of that, and there's something just so powerful about being in community.
Hmm.
And I think that is in large part why we're dealing with some of the issues we are dealing with as Black men, because we're so fragmented and we don't have community. And again, these are things that everybody needs. Everybody needs. But I would have to say that we have been conditioned that we don't need that. And so when we find ourselves seeking brotherhood, right, because this space is called nurturing brotherhood, we don't know what to do with it. And we can't even admit that we want it.
Mm.
And so think about the work that it takes to work against your own nature and intrinsic need to be in community and
Mm-hmm.
to have touch and to have bonds and to have brotherhood, right? And it's as simple as, I'm sure y'all are aware, but when a baby's born, touch and community are more important than food itself. Did y'all know that?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a baby will not develop the way they are supposed to develop if they are not getting love and attention and care and support and community. It's more important than food. And so that's what, to me, the power of groups are. And I think it's something that we've been doing for time immemorial, right? This is something that I think we've in some ways got away from. And I think that's what scares me more than anything, is that we're so much more isolated than we've ever been. And this is as a global society. This is, again, is not just specific to Black
Mm-hmm.
men, we are impacted as well. And so that's one of the things that we want to reintroduce Black men to, is that this power of community is important. Because that's something I had to learn too, is I can do it by myself, but why do it by myself? It's so much sweeter when you have somebody to relish in it with you, right? And I just find that makes life so much more rich. You have somebody to share the life's ups and downs with you, right? And again, I think somewhere along the way, the trust piece has been broken, right? And this, for us, I think the goal is, let's repair that trust amongst us as Black men. And I'm crazy enough to think that we really can change the world. I'm crazy enough to think that, right? And I think this is how we do it, right? And I think we do it by acknowledging when the magic is happening, so to speak, and just being faithful and consistent with doing what we're called to do. And so I think that's the power of group. Even being here with y'all, I can feel it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was tired hopping on this call. Now I'm like, dang, am I gonna be able to sleep tonight?
Energized.
For real, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm feeling so connected, right? Being with brothers who I can feel the love and the care, who have stories of themselves, right? And again, the last piece is, it's not just us we're bringing to the space, but it's everybody who's come before us, right? I think we forget that we're bringing a culture with us, right? That we come from, and all that's mixed into the room, right? And it's just beautiful to watch. I love it. This is something I'm passionate about. This is something that I get excited about. That I want others.
Man, it's funny as you were saying that, Nate, as both of you were talking, and we have been kind of talking about your pathways here, and you both are sort of involved in the same line of work, educationally, and then by, profession and stuff, generally speaking. But what I just thought about is, like, when you all show up to a group, the power of group is really the power of any body of people. You can show up with what you bring to the group, but every individual in there brings something too. And each individual is just as important. And I think sometimes looking
100%.
at the dynamics of group, a lot of times we're used to, it's like being in church, right? We've grown over time in the Black community to think like the pastor is the most important person. And everybody wants to be the pastor. Not everybody don't really want to be the pastor. They just want that notoriety, but they don't realize what comes with that if the person is stewarding it correctly, right? There's a large, deep, hard fall if the person doesn't steward that gift correctly. But it is just a gift. It is just one of the gifts. And each person comes to a group with a gift. And if the group is led correctly, and a person is able to like see how they fit in there, they join as and that synergy become, it's like, I've heard this word a few times this week, a force multiplier, right? And I'm reminded of scripture that talks about for as the body is one and as many, it's talking about the church, but I think this is a very good description of what a body looks like. From 1 Corinthians chapter 12, it talks in verse 12, for the body is one and has many parts, and all the parts of that body, though many, are one body. So also is Christ. For we were all baptized into one spirit, into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, were made slaves are free, and we were all made to drink of one spirit. So the body is not one part, but many. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body, in spite of this, it belongs to the body. It still belongs to the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body. In spite of this, it still belongs to the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body was an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But now God has placed each one of the parts in one body just as he wanted. And if they were all the same part, where would the body be? Now there are many parts, yet one body. And I think that's the value of group. And so when someone hears and thinks, why should I become a part of the group? You should become a part of a group because you are a part of the group. You know what I mean? You have a part to play in that group. If you're a listener, there's a reason why you listen the way that you listen. There's a reason, even the person who's judgmental, it's okay to be that way if you realize how that fits in the group. We're not judgmental to put people down, but there's a sense of security and safety that a person that's very cautious sometimes. But I mean, there's room for all kinds of gifts that come together to make up a community. And one last thing I'll say, I was having a conversation with someone about being a business owner. And I was like, I'm not a business owner. I'm likely never going to open up a business. I am a worker. I'm not a business owner. I want to work for your business. I don't want to run the business. And everybody can't be a business owner. If everybody in the Black community is supposed to have a business, who's going to work for the business? So somebody has to not be a business owner, right? But if you don't bring that business and show people benefit of why being a part of your organization is going to help them, this is how and I think it's the same in the group setting. If people don't see that the value of your group specifically is that when you go to this group, you are valued and seen as an individual. No one knows exactly what you bring, but whatever you bring and however you show up is going to be valued in that moment. It is designed specifically for you to feel valued when you walk in. There are no big I's or little U's in y'all's group. And I think that that's really important. I think that needs to be pushed more and more, that we're not individuals. We're made to live together. We're made to be in community. And I can't devalue my gift because I don't have a counseling degree and because I don't, whatever. I can't look at you as something better than me. I look at you as, I look at you and say, this is what you all do, but I'm here for a reason. And what is it? And through that community, you guys would likely help me. And you guys have created a space where I'd be able to identify what I'm on earth for. So that's good. You reminded me of that when you guys were talking. So thanks for letting me go on a tirade.
No.
You're part of the collective.
Yeah.
and that's all good. Yeah. Because part of what happens at the group is it's not like individual therapy, like you were talking about, Jason, where a therapist is going to ask you and just you questions, right? You've got to be engaged the whole time in your own personal individual therapy. In the group, that's not the requirement. So you can be the one that sits and just chills and listens. In fact, we need a bunch of people to do that because can't everybody talk at once? So you need people that are just going to be listening. And I love what Nate said, that the knowledge and wisdom that comes out of that group as people share from their lived experiences is as valuable as, and sometimes I sit there and go, wait, where did Nate and Ojere go? The group is giving advice and counsel and sharing personal stories in order to educate in the way we used to, right? That it used to be the elders and the uncles of our clan where we get together at Crab Fest or whatever it was that we were doing, and they'd be sharing their stories. And the younger men would be listening in as the wiser ones would share their story. And it's beautiful to see that happen in real time in 2025.
Yes, sir.
So it's a beautiful thing, and that's why I love these brothers to death.
Right back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I often,
I just want go ahead, Ojere.
now just quickly, I often say that people have these, back to when they were talking about these stigmas about like brothers, like not wanting to go to therapy. My experience is if you create a space for Black men to where they feel seen and heard,
Come
brothers
on.
is gonna show up and they're gonna talk. They gonna talk.
Yeah, that's
Sometimes
real.
we gotta tell brothers we gotta share the space. Brothers is gonna talk.
Yeah, we only
You
got
know?
one mic, and yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
yeah, facts. But no, and again, I think that's kind of the thing of how do we again destigmatize the process of therapy itself, because the other part too is like some of us have gone to therapy and either we've had a mediocre therapist or we've been harmed, right?
Yeah.
And I think working with Black men does require somebody special, because you always have to keep in mind the cultural considerations, for lack of a better term, right? Because what I think about is, and this again, I like to ask, different questions of what were the times where you were vulnerable and it was missed?
Mm-hmm.
And how did you respond to that? Right? Because I would say that there are times when Black men are vulnerable, but it doesn't look like it looks like for everybody else. And so the vulnerability gets missed. And so those are the kind of questions that I like to ask to get people thinking about, oh, well, one of the things he'll say is like, how you doing? Oh, I'm straight. That to me is a sign of vulnerability, because that says, oh, you teeter-tottering at best, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm maintaining, whatever it may be, right? So there are these little colloquialisms, these euphemisms that we'll use that can kind of, if you're privy to it and you're paying attention, that you can start to, ask more about that, right? And again, I think for us, it's really about, I don't consider myself to be a leader of the group. Again, I like to think that we're empowering members of the group to lead with us, right? Because again, I think about, spaces where I think that makes us feel most comfortable. That's where the knowledge is shared, right? And stories are shared. And one of the things that I always honor and respect is a person's lived experience. And so you've been living this life, you've been living it. And it's just about giving you the language to be able to kind of call what's happening, right? It's like if you're hooping, like you don't need to, you cross somebody over, you don't need to know it's a crossover, right? But somebody say, you just did it in and out, right? It's kind of like that, right? Like, I've been doing that, but you just told me what the language is, and sometimes that's helpful for people. But if we come and give you the language, that doesn't mean that you weren't doing it before. You don't know how to do it, right? If that makes sense. So, I think it's just, again, about empowering folks to, really kind of build them up to say, hey, like, you are, sort of, the leader of your own life. And I don't want to take that from you. And I just certainly don't want to sit here and sort of, lecture. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just as we are being considered at the time, we're at about 73 minutes. And we
gotta keep this going.
No,
another hour.
Dude, we say that all the time. We always tell people we usually go about 75 minutes. The only reason I just want us to be cognizant of the time, but one of the things that I'm curious about, just as in closing, is we talk about the group, but we've also talked about that you are both therapists. If someone can't come to the group, or someone, because the group happens every first Tuesday, right? 6 o'clock, basically about 6 to 8, correct?
Yes.
Well, 7:50, because they're not playing Malcolm X. They come in, they cut the lights off. They don't care if you're crying or you finally got this brother to talk about his feelings. Y'all better take this to the parking lot. But how is it possible for somebody who may watch this to get a hold of y'all outside of the first Tuesday group? Is that something as therapists that you both offer? And if so, what is that?
So just real quickly, that's an excellent point that I don't think we touched on is, while the space is therapeutic, it's not therapy itself, right?
Yes.
And what
Yes.
I mean by that is it's not therapy, right? In the traditional sense that, insurance and bill this. This is not that. This is a community group that's designed to be adjacent to that, right? So in no way, shape, or form is this a replacement for therapy, or what we even call this therapy. That's not what this is. This is
But
building
it is
community.
therapeutic.
But it is therapeutic,
right?
right? And it is to build a bridge and a pathway to that space if that's what you want to do, right?
Gotcha.
And so it is therapeutic, but we don't refer to it as therapy, right?
Gotcha.
And again, we'll talk about issues, and if things get too deep and too heavy, we'll say, hey, let's find some time to talk after, and let's get you connected, right? Sort of thing, because there's certain things you don't want to open up in a space like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's a whole other ramifications you have to take into consideration when doing that, right? And that's not what this space is, right? But again, it is to build that bridge. And so what we do is, if somebody has a need and they want to talk afterwards and get connected to services, we certainly help with that, right? And that's the purpose of this group too, is to say, hey, we know a wealth of brothers that can help you with whatever it is, right? And so it's a resource, right? And so but what I do is, I'm always willing to share my information with folks if they're interested in going that route. I do share my contact information, and I have a website that I can share with folks who are interested or want to get more information.
Well, make sure we'll get that, and we'll post it in the link on YouTube so folks can be aware of that, because that is important. That's very important. What about you, Ojere?
Yeah, kind of in a similar vein as Brother Nate was saying. The space is kind of a therapeutic experience and an introduction into that type of work. And while the space isn't intended to bring up stuff, I mean, sometimes things do come up, and the beauty of that is if it does come up, Nate and I can hold it. Right, we're not gonna be like, oh my God, you're feeling right. We'll be able to hold that with you, and if somebody's looking to like further work with somebody, as Nate mentioned, I do have some contacts throughout San Diego, I can connect folks with. For me, like working with me, I think I try to separate, like if I'm seeing you in this space, like to not work with you in that space. And so um, as a dual kind of relationship thing, but sometimes you can avoid that. And so for me, I'm working out of the weight room through a group practice, and that's where someone could work with me individually through the weight room, which is virtual. I'm not working in person through a private practice yet. And so the weight room would be a way that somebody could get connected with me. Unless you're a student at Grossmont College, that's where I also work at. If you're a student taking classes there, we could work together.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Well, we are at a point, if we continue, I already know this is going to go another hour. I have 100 more questions. It just means that we need to bring y'all back. And I think it could be something regular. We certainly have some things we'll talk about off the show here. So we do want to ask y'all to stay afterwards. But I just want to say I'm just grateful for you brothers, man. Nate, we've had a chance to talk over the last couple of weeks, and just super cool, man. Your passion exudes, but it's not just in this though. You're a passionate brother in general. You have a general passion, and when you give yourself to something, there better be some resources to help continue to fuel that fire, because you're going to consume whatever's around, and I think that's really good. You have very purposeful passion.
Appreciate
that. And I like that. Ojere, I will always say, man, I still am stunned in a great way that you that what you're offering the world is consistent with who you were always meant to be. And I'm super blessed and grateful to be able to witness that and see that in your life. You and your partner when you was young, man, is really doing some really good things, man. I knew y'all since you was super youngsters, man, and I'm grateful. I've known you for a lot of years, and so I'm just very thankful that you are who you are right now, and that this is you. And together, I see what you both are doing is very transformative in the community of San Diego, and I think it's going to take courage, it's going to take opportunity, and it's going to take resources. And so, my hope and my prayer is that that those things align at the right time. And so, thank you, brothers, for your consistency in what you've been doing so far. It's paying off. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, brother. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If I can drop one thing,
yes, sir.
Just one thing.
Yes, take your time.
Brother Nate had talked about Black men and our lack of touch. I came across a brother who has a project called The Chronically Undertouched, and he has a documentary called Dark and Tender, and it's talking about that same thing about Black men in touch and how many of us are undertouched. And one of the things about touch is touch becomes so sexualized, and there's already a lot of homophobia between in Black male spaces. But just wanted to put that out there. Maybe this is a conversation at some point to come back to about Black men in touch, and where we're at with the idea of touch, because as Nate said, we're social beings and touch is important. They say you need so many hugs per day. I know I don't get enough hugs per day. I don't know about y'all. And so, how many of us are walking around, chronically undertouched? And what does that do to the nervous system? Like, what does that do to us relationally? And so maybe this is something to kind of bring back in a conversation at some point.
Beautiful. What about you, Nate? Any closing thoughts or anything you want to just leave here?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to you, brothers, for creating this space for not just for us, but for everybody listening. Everybody on this call, y'all mean so much to me. You know what I mean? And everything you said about me, I think about Ubuntu, right? I am because we are,
We are.
So, this is what I've yearned for so long. And I'm grateful that I've allowed myself to take that in, and I'm just so grateful to you, brothers, for putting this together, because I know it's a labor of love, and my heart's feeling real full right now, so I needed this, so thank you, brothers.
Yes. Thank the two of you for having us back.
Thank you.
And for doing this work.
Our pleasure. Yeah. I'm going to turn it back over to Jason just a second to close this in prayer. But I got to give you kudos, Ojere, because you're promoting your future appearance on the podcast as you end this one. Maybe next time when we come back, we could talk about touch, and we have a topic already set up. That would be really good. There's a documentary out there, and there's a lot of great discussion about touch. So I'm just saying, maybe next time we could talk about that. That's well placed. Way to call your shot. I appreciate both y'all, brothers.
Yeah.
Jason, go ahead and close us out.
One of the things Mike said in the beginning and starting this is that it's a deeply spiritual space. And I always say before I pray, I've been chosen. I'm a Christian. So that's what I identify as. That's the tradition that I follow. And so when we pray, I pray in that vein. And so we always like to thank God for the day. Thank God just to have this opportunity. There's a lot of people that didn't wake up today, had far better plans with their day than I did. And so I always like to just be grateful for a day. In spite of all that I got going on, all the trials and tribulations, I'm grateful to still be in the fight. And so as we pray, that's the heart that I want to bring to God, is just sincere gratitude. So for those that are watching, those who may watch later, Feel free if you pray in this tradition or not, it's okay, but this is just an act of obedience to do, and it's a pleasure. So God, I just want to say thank you. Grateful to wake up today. Thank you for this space. Thank you for Ojere and for Nate. Thank you for what they mean to the community. Thank you for the space that they created. First Tuesdays, 6 to 8, Malcolm X Library, 6 to 7:45, really 7:55, knowing how we get out. But thank you for the vision to create a space like that. Thank you for all the men that show up to that space, not knowing what to expect. That is an act of faith, to show up, not really knowing exactly what is going to be there, but showing up. And I'm just grateful that they've created something for everybody to be able to take something away from it. It's so needed. So thank you for the vision to have that. And one of the words that was said a lot tonight by Nate is consistency. And sometimes consistency is difficult. And so I just pray that you would give them what is needed to be able to remain consistent, whether that's resources or whatever it is that they may need to be consistent. And thank you for this medium that you've chosen for us to have these meaningful conversations. And we're just very, very grateful. I don't want to ask for nothing. Just want to say thank you for being such a great dad. And we love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Y'all, thanks for coming. Lord willing, as my daddy was saying, the creek don't rise. We'll see y'all next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. And again, thank you, Nate and Ojere, for coming by tonight and blessing the mic, blessing and giving the world something to be hopeful for. We're grateful for y'all. Thank you for that.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jason, for the opportunity to come back.
Yes, sir.